All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about New Year's resolutions, dystopian predictions, the evolution of the ice cream man, and the art of the suicide Slurpee. Well, it's behind us, Chris. 2024 is still here at the time of this recording, but Christmas, i.e. the holiday excitement and all the preparation and all the relatives and all the emotions that go through it, and really just when we get to this age, the energy that it takes to even survive that kind of commotion. I didn't even get to take a nap, for F's sake. So it was awesome. It actually went pretty flawlessly. We have lots and lots of extended family and relatives that come over. I think on Christmas Eve, it's our big time for everyone to come by. I think we had maybe like 25 people in my house all at once.
That's a lot of people.
But you know, it's one of those things where I'm a big fan of the story A Christmas Carol. I think they've done 100 different versions of it over the years, but I'm kind of a sucker for it. I just love it, you know?
You find Scrooge very relatable? Is that why?
Yeah, it's the opposite of that, where I always say to myself, if I can look back on my life and not feel like I need to be visited by three ghosts, right? If I feel like I've led a good enough life and I've been a nice enough person that I'm not the one that should be visited by three ghosts, then I've done pretty good. And it's the same thing with "And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon.
The little boy blue with the man." Yeah.
If I can listen to that song and not feel like driving my car off a cliff.
Which you've almost done anyway.
I've almost done. That's right. That's right.
Inadvertently, but still.
So long story short, we made a bunch of cookies and had people over. And I almost feel like a ballroom in a hotel where you're constantly flipping the room for the next event. So it's, here's the crowd on Christmas Eve, then we got to flip it for the next morning for the next round of family that comes over, and then flip it again for the next thing, and then
load out and load in. Right.
Flip it again, loading out, loading in. We had 3 different events happening, Chris, but by God, it was a great year. Everything went pretty damn well. How about you?
A similar Christmas Day, but not quite that many people. I think, and luckily had got to be a guest as opposed to a host, which I think you definitely appreciate more as an adult, right? Because being the hosting, like you said, it's a lot of freaking work. And as a kid, you don't care, right? You'll go anywhere, or you'll sit at home and play with your G.I. Joe with Kung Fu Grip and just be happy because you're not really doing anything. Right, all the adults are doing stuff, and the moms and the aunts and the grandmas. If you have a grandma that's still living and breathing, and those sort of things. So again, it definitely shifts, right, from being just a kid participant to being the adult. One of the adults responsible, and then the adult participant is like maybe you pick up a couple of dirty plates and take them over to the sink. But for the most part, you get to kind of kick back and stuff your face and do whatever. And yeah, so mine is very similar. So I didn't have that responsibility on either end. And it was kind of cool, I think, because normally we do a lot. Very traditional in the Christmas Eve, prior to New Year's would do there is the action. It's not just because of what people have seen on television, most recently on an episode of The Bear, the 7 fishes, which is an Italian tradition on Christmas Eve, where you don't eat any meat and you eat fish, and basically in courses, and you eat 7 of them. It can be shellfish, so you can be a little squishy. So you can have shrimp, but you can have calamari and things like that. But but the thing about that is that's a ton of freaking work. So kind of a modified version of that this year. And no, other than that, it's kind of Christmas. Christmas is for the kids, and we have a lot of memories from again, we talk about the Christmas gifts or the Christmas gifts that weren't, and definitely the Scrooge aspect of it. Yes, you definitely don't want to find yourself Scrooge-like. You definitely don't want to find yourself looking back and getting visited by some apparition telling you what a rat bastard you were at some point in time in your life. As if the people who don't know they're rat bastards don't know. They do. But anyway, I think definitely, it's that sort of, it's that time of year. Is it the most wonderful time of the year? I don't know. Supposedly the suicide rates go up, things like that. But now I'm veering into the darkness again, and I don't know if I want to talk about the darkness of the holidays again.
I just don't think any of us want to be told that we have to feel a certain way. And I think that is the trap of things like Christmas is everyone is expected to be on their best behavior or expected to be enjoying the fruits of their labor and their family and love and joy. And obviously it's like the same thing that I feel when someone tells me this is the greatest movie you will ever see. I'm so excited you're about to watch this movie. And then they're sitting looking at you the whole time you're watching it like a puppy dog, just waiting for you to go, oh, you were right. It is the greatest movie ever. And it's like, dude, don't effing tell me that this is the greatest movie ever, or I'm going to automatically hate it. Now you've destroyed this movie for me. Just don't tell me what to do or how to feel. That's my thing. Well, Chris, I just did it, didn't I? I just opened myself up for a visit by 3 ghosts just by saying that. Dang it. I was doing so well.
Well, yeah, but you didn't do that to the point because first of all, because everybody knows the story of Scrooge, and I think maybe you didn't open yourself up too much because it's not like you said,
right.
You've got to watch. Maybe it's because to me the greatest version of Scrooge is the Muppets Christmas Carol. Okay, that was Michael Caine and the Muppets,
Mm-hmm.
Kermit as Bob Cratchit. That's all you need. So no, you're absolutely right. The build up, the expectation. My favorite Christmas movie, again, we're not going to have this debate, is Die Hard. It warmed my heart because I sat down and watched Die Hard with my 12-year-old daughter, who finally wanted in the Die Hard club. And I'm thinking, and we usually go like, it's not like there's, it's rated R, but it's mostly for violence and a lot of F-bombs. And yeah, there is like a brief drug scene. And yeah, there is a brief half-naked woman, as she referenced. She didn't even notice the drug scene. She referenced the half-naked woman. I just played it down.
Yeah, but Chris, the drug scene is just cocaine. And that was so prevalent in the 80s. Cocaine. I wouldn't even call it a drug scene. I would just call it, somebody just getting ready to get energized for the next scene. That's just not a big deal.
It's played for laughs in the movie. So you can just kind of go, it's okay. You had to be there.
And by the way, if you're about to get shot by terrorists point blank, you may as well go out with a bang, right? And do a couple of rails before you get hit. And Chris, I will say about Die Hard, which could be, a 3-part podcast episode, a trilogy, just talking about that movie. But I will say that in that film, as dumb as this sounds, it was one of the first times that a little bit of a twist in a movie actually worked on me. The first time a movie twist worked was when I saw The Sting back in the day. That's a long time ago, right? With Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And it's a very clever movie where you're led down a certain path. And then at the end, it's like, oh, I get it. This was an Ocean's 11 kind of a thing. Yeah. And the big twist in that movie that just tickled me to death and I loved, I totally believed that Hans Gruber, when he finally meets up with John McClain and they're staring at each other and Hans Gruber, the character Hans Gruber, obviously, is pretending that he's just one of the hostages. And
Bill Clay.
Right. And Bruce Willis hands him a gun and says, hey, man, you're going to need some protection. And I am an idiot. I had a hook in my mouth. I believed that was going to be the end of the movie. And nope, because John McClain didn't put any bullets in that gun, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, what do you think of fucking stupid Hans?
Man. Gruber fell for it. And so did I.
Yes. Excellent. No, that's a great point. And so that's when you knew it. Then you didn't know what to expect, did you? It was the rest of it was a nonstop thrill ride.
And a cautionary tale to always wear shoes.
Or if you hear gunshots in the hallway, before you do anything, put your shoes on, right? It's one of those things, right? Putting your shoes on is always like, let me ask you this. It's like when you put your shoes on, obviously you put your socks on first. What's your process? Walk me through your process.
Well, in the old days, it was as I'm standing up, I can easily put on sock number 1, sock number 2, shoe number 1, shoe number 2. I can almost do it as I'm walking or running. That's how agile I am. Now,
nimble you were.
It's sit your fat butt on the ground, roll backwards
Brace yourself.
like a cockroach that is rolled on its back, and wiggle both feet until they eventually make it into the socks, and then try to get your little shoes on, and then roll over again onto all fours, and then slowly lift yourself up, being careful not to throw out your back. How's that? Okay, maybe it's not quite that bad, but yeah.
Very, very expressive. I can visualize, hoping not to get your socks. And with me, it's like, I hope I did a good job trimming my toenails.
Oh, I'm big on that, man. I will not have ugly toes. Yeah.
Yes, but it's just like, yes. So yours is similar. It's like sock and a sock, a shoe and a shoe. There are people that would put like a sock and a shoe, and then a sock and a shoe. It's like, well, what the hell is that? Like, what if you have to run outside?
That is someone who's mentally insane. That's got to be the earliest form of, oh my God, I might be bipolar. Yeah, that's absolutely. If you see someone do that, run from that relationship. There is no reason to put on sock, shoe, sock, shoe. Sock, shoe, sock, shoe. That's a person that needs to be checked in therapy immediately. I would even say 911 mental emergency if you see someone doing that. And if you're in a relationship with someone that's sock, shoe, I don't know what to say.
Get out.
Yeah.
Get out of that relationship. It's only going to get worse. That's a sure sign. It's like, get out. Okay, I saw them put their shoes on. Don't like it. I'm getting out now. No explanation. Hey, this is just, it's not you. Well, it's the way you put your shoes on. Okay, and I can't
Chris, what about
by that.
Sock, sandal. What do we do with that guy? Sock, open-toed sandal. That's a person that's saying, I'm not just someone who doesn't care about how I look. I'm actually a sociopath at this point. I just am living in a tiny little bubble. That person has given up on even caring what other people think. Sock, sandal. Dude, come on. There should be an island for those people. I'm not super picky, but that's too far. That goes too far.
That's a sure sign that it's over. You know what I mean? That I just don't care.
Yeah.
It's like tucking in a t-shirt. It's like, what are you doing, man? You don't tuck in your t-shirt. It's the same sort of thing. Certain style, certain shoes. It's like driving a Camry. Okay, it's like, I might as well just be announcing to the entire world that it's over.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people did that early when they started driving minivans. It's like, I don't care how many kids you have, man.
Yeah.
It's just like you're just waving the red flag or the white flag, basically saying, here I am. And as much as I try to cling, as I try to cling to my youth or try to cling to things that are youthful, there are certain things that, like I said, you might as well just, it's over, and there's no turning back. And those are some of the things.
Now, you sent me a photo of a very cool, vintage, by the way, 1970s ultra collectible item. Amazing that it's still in existence and no one threw it in the trash can, right? Because for most people, it would have no value and no one would give a shit. But for us, it's really cool. Can you tell our podcast audience what that was?
Opening Christmas gifts. And my son insisted on handing me this rather large box and preface this by, you're either like not going to like this or you're really going to love this. And I'm like, wow, well, you're really going out on a limb there. There's no gray areas. And so the thing is, the box was huge, but it was super light. So excited. It's like, ooh, I like that. I'll take those odds. You're going to really like this, or you're going to hit it. And I opened it up, and yes, it was vintage. It was light. It was white. It was in there. It was, I could tell there was a date on it that said copyright 1977, and it was a vintage. I guess they were reusable. We didn't really reuse them. It was collectible plastic, Black Panther Slurpee cup.
Nice.
Okay, now back in the time, I remember when we would go to 7-Eleven and they I think they did it with, like, I want to say, I'll use the term very loosely. They did with like rock stars. I think there was a time where they had musicians.
Oh, we'll get into that.
So we'll get into that. Right. And so remember, but here's the thing, right? going at the time, there was no self-service when you got your own Slurpee, right? So there'd be you'd walk into 7-Eleven and say, yeah, I'll take a cola Slurpee, and a big, some sort of, unkempt, sort of greasy guy behind the counter would turn around, and there'd be that long vertical sort of canister.
A sleeve.
And you could see that, sleeve, cup dispenser, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
And you could see the cups protruding from the bottom. But it was the same thing as like putting a quarter in one of those machines and hoping, with the NFL helmets, and hoping you'd get that you wouldn't get, I don't know, the Redskins or something like
the
that.
The Chargers. No, I'm kidding.
Well, exactly. So, you turn in that crank and you get, but at least there you did it yourself. But here, so, reach over and pull out a cup, and then that's what you got. You couldn't say, hey man, can I get, I see Spider-Man right there. I really don't want Iron Fist. No, you got what you got.
Are you saying that the minimum wage guy that worked behind the counter at 7-Eleven wasn't concerned about your collection? Are you saying that guy who made $1.75 an hour didn't give a shit about your personal collection and wasn't going to...
Exactly what I'm saying.
He wasn't going to keep pulling cups out of the sleeve until we finally found Robin, who you only needed because you already had Batman?
I don't know if Robin even got his own cup. But
I doubt it.
Yeah, it was exactly. No, he didn't care. No, and you couldn't be bothered. And I think those guys were always sort of mildly intimidating. Like, I don't think scrawny 11-year-old, 67-pound me would have said, excuse me, sir, can you say what other cups you have there? Because I really am not a fan. But no, so anyway, my son, and he found it. He gave me the story. He described this store somewhere in LA, a vintage, just a thrift shop, vintage shop, and he found it, and it's great. Be displayed on the shelf with a bunch of old, stuff that I have, tchotchkes as my wife likes to call them. I think tchotchkes is like, nah, that's like something you get at a trade show.
I hate that word. I don't know why. Everybody has words they hate, like moist. That's a big word that people hate. Sorry. Tchotchke to me is just, no.
Right.
But Chris, this is vintage Black Panther, mother scratcher. That is a cool dude because Black Panther, and I'll let you talk about the relevance of Black Panther to you, but I mean, Black Panther was one where you didn't always see them at the comic store, and when you did, and it was
not in 1977,
super cool character, man. But if you did read a Black Panther comic, you would spend the next couple days running around the house pretending that you were the Black Panther, because it's a really cool hero that has awesome superpowers. So anyway.
Right. Yeah. Right. The first Black superhero, the first to have his own comic book.
Oh, is it the first? I wasn't sure. Okay.
To headline his own comic book. And so I think that sort of really important, culturally important. And then obviously movie franchise many, many decades later. Yeah. So super cool for that, because it wouldn't have been, I think it's probably, I hate to say it, it's probably much cooler in 2024 than it was in 1977.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think the kids were like, hey man, I'll trade you my Captain America for your Black Panther in Mobile, Alabama. But there they definitely would have
maybe not.
They would have asked for a refund probably. Sorry, Mobile, Alabama. But anyway, so I think that, so cool, like I said, highlight for the guests. And I got some nice stuff, but that cool one, hero. because again, it's always it literally is the thought that counts, right? When because anybody can just go and buy something. Hey, you're a large, right? What size are you? Or, oh yeah, I you like blue or whatever. But that, like I said, so yes, he was like, you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. Well, I loved it. It was great. And almost brings a tear to my eye. Almost.
No, and it's the memories that it triggers, right? Maybe you did or didn't have a Black Panther comic book, but it doesn't matter, because even if you did or didn't, it triggers these memories of your trips to 7-Eleven, like you said, and all the stuff that we used to do. Like, remember how clever we thought we were when we would do the suicide version of a Slurpee, which of course, anyone that's Gen X knows, the suicide means you're going to put in every flavor. Much to the annoyance of the guy behind the counter. You little
the greasy guy behind the counter.
Now I have to go squirt, 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 squirt.
I have to move my feet.
You effer. And we got 4 flavors today. And I remember the half-ass attitude with those guys. It's like, I'm not doing. I remember a guy at a 7-Eleven saying, we don't do suicides here. And I thought to myself, what do you mean? Is that coming from corporate? Fuck you, man. Take your little $1.50 an hour hand and go to each pump. And can you spare 30 seconds to give me what I want? You, whatever. I was a very bitter little kid. No. But,
or if you did, it was kind of spilling over. It was very half-assed suicide. It was like spilling over the sides, and then they'd hand it to you, and you immediately, get a little sticky and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely. Well, the trip to 7-Eleven was, it was just that. I mean, I had one within walking distance, although we would get on our bikes, or sometimes we walk. And 7-Eleven was an adventure when you were that age, right? Because man, I can get basically anything I want in life is in the 7-Eleven, right? Because you had pretty basic needs back then. So it's just like, if I want a Slurpee, I can get it at 7-Eleven. I want a comic book. I want baseball cards, wacky packs, Abba Zabba, now and laters, right? Pixie sticks, whatever I want, I could get it from 7-Eleven. I want one of those, or the ice cream. Remember the sundaes and those little cups with the wooden spoons, or the Carnation. My favorite was the Carnation frozen malt, right? And it came in. It was solid. It was like a brick of chocolate, and that that spoon was brutal.
Yes.
But you had to have that spoon because a plastic spoon would snap in half.
Well,
trying to use it in that ice cream. The Sno-Cones, like I said, everything you wanted was at 7-Eleven, and they didn't even have pizza or hot dogs or the stuff like they have now. Let's
pause 1 second and talk about that shake, and let's also talk about the evolution of the Sno-Cone, because that shake, and everyone remembers this, right? It came in a paper cup, and it had like a paper flip top to it, and you would kind of flip the top off, and then
you had to grab that little tab,
and you would get a wooden spoon that was about 2 inches long. Thank you, thank you, no one. And you had to then sit there and wait, I would say about 15 minutes. For it to melt enough that you could actually penetrate it. I don't know if they used liquid effing nitrogen to freeze these things, but it was a brick. And by the way, don't even think about leaving that in the sun for too long, because then it reverts to its natural state, which is a chemical hockey puck. It shrinks to a teeny tiny little hockey puck that is made out of pure chemicals. You are eating, and good for you.
It was so good.
Good for you, chemists, that you could take nothing from nature and make me believe I'm eating ice cream. I mean, hey, hats off. But Jesus Christ, was that gross. And then how about the Sno-Cones, Chris, that we would get with the ice cream truck, right? And the ice cream truck would roll up and you get a Sno-Cone. But those Sno-Cones, Chris, were they Hawaiian shaved ice? No, they were not.
No.
It was a rock solid block of ice that was vaguely dipped with hints of some original flavoring, and
rainbow.
You just had to like chip your 2 front teeth and just gnaw off your molars just to maybe get a snippet of pineapple flavor. But I don't know why, we loved it. And when shaved ice came around years and years later, soft, delicate, fluffy ice and then had the delicious, just like insane flavors, and at the bottom a little bit of ice cream. It blew my mind. I'm like, thank you. Finally, the Sno-Cone has evolved, and civilized humans can enjoy this treat.
The Sno-Cone gods were smiling upon you, Jeff.
Yeah.
And you felt whole and you felt complete. I mean, I think the whole ice cream man, right? Because there was never it was one of those jobs. It was a glass ceiling that women could not break through.
That is so true. I never thought about that.
No self-respecting woman would drive in that thing with it sounded like it was like organ, like almost like there should have been a monkey, because it was like nee, 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 nee. It just kind of cranked. I don't know if it was the music was attached to like the gas pedal, because basically that's sort of like as it would stop and slow down, so would the music. And so that truck, and which looked like, it's like, your parents would have never let you go for a ride in that truck. And you probably wouldn't have wanted, because I don't know if they were ever tied to like missing children or anything like that. But again, the guys, and apologies to anybody out there who knew an ice cream man or had an ice cream man for a family member, but they weren't the kind of guy that you would necessarily, They drove to you, and they were in your neighborhood, and they were out in front of your house or down the street. And again, it was like, oh, I'll have an Abba Zabba or a push-up or like one of those, a Fudgesicle. Was it a Fudgesicle or was it a Fudgeicle? Ice cream sandwich, ice cream sandwich or drumstick or yes, any of those other things.
Rocket Pop.
And right, Rocket Pop, nice pull. The thing is the quality, and again, I think the quality was pretty piss poor, right? But the convenience of it is that you could have been playing Smear the Queer in your front yard, and then the ice cream man came down, rolling down the street, and you'd run in the house and get a dime, right, or something ridiculous like that. So you were willing to sacrifice quality for convenience, right? Which a lot of people, we still do nowadays, right? But that was the whole and then, man, if you were inside and you missed the ice cream man, that sucked. You saw that ice cream, all your friends had their ice cream, and that ice cream truck was rolling away, and your mom was trying to fiddle with her little coin purse that had like that little, that weird little latch, and she couldn't get it open in time. Like, Mom.
Wow, that's an oddly specific story.
Well, you know what I mean? Or that little rubber thing that you people would squeeze and get the coins out.
That's right. Oh my God, I forgot about those.
Had the little chain.
Yes.
And on it. And it was just like, come on, Mom, come on.
You're talking about the little piece of hollow rubber that was usually in an oval shape. And when you squeezed it, the slit opened up, and then you could, oh my God, I forgot about those. And Chris, was there any worse feeling than, like you said, you're in the middle of a chore, like let's say you're washing the dishes, and you hear the ice cream truck, and you hear all your friends, ice cream truck, and they're all running out there, and your mom goes, not until you're done with the dishes. And you're like, what? And it's just a race against time.
Right.
And
you always lost.
Don't you dare rush it. I want those things clean. And oh my God.
Because you might have gotten close. You might have gotten like 2 houses away, and that guy's driving away, and that bastard sees you in his rearview mirror.
And keeps
he
going.
Doesn't stop.
No, he keeps going.
He's like, yeah, I'm not going to stop for a dime.
No.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, I'm just not going to do this. One kid. I got 9 kids. I don't need 10.
Yeah.
And he would just, so there was just like, and you're running, you basically like, stop. And you're running. You might be barefoot, right? There might be some middle summer, the asphalt is scorching. You don't care. It's like, damn it. And because you never, see, here's the thing about ice cream trucks as well. It's like, there was no rhyme or reason. It's like, oh yeah, they come by every day at 2. There was nothing.
No.
You might not see that ice cream truck again for weeks. Right. And
that's how the life of a sex offender works. You've got to keep switching locations. That
guy was from Orange County.
You got to really keep everyone guessing. Yeah. If there's a pattern to it, you're just asking for trouble, right? And let's just be clear.
That guy was from Orange County.
With a very minor exception, you are not choosing that job unless you've got something bad happening in the back of your brain. We'll move on from that topic, but I do question the ice cream man. And Chris, we may have already told this story on the podcast. Forgive me if we did, but when my kids were on our little cul-de-sac here, and they were of ice cream truck age, our ice cream man was very evolved. It wasn't just ice cream and treats; it was also toys. So a lot of those toys were guns, right? Like, well, I mean, obviously fake guns, but machine guns and little fake Uzis and 45 caliber cap
M16s.
guns, M16s. Yeah. And one day, my 2 sons and their buddy and his sister, all of these kids are anywhere from 5 years old to 8 years old. They go down to the end of the street and they come back from what effectively was an arms dealer, right? And there should have been, almost like Reservoir Dogs, I should have done slow motion video of them walking back to the house, each of them with multiple guns over their shoulders, walking in slow motion. And the little sister had a candy cigarette hanging out of her mouth and a candy necklace and candy bracelets all up and down her. It just looked like a scene from like a Quentin Tarantino film or something. Like, what the fuck? What did you guys do down there? What is that guy selling? Oh my God, it was hilarious.
That is outstanding. But the toy guns, when we were kids, first of all, like you said, they looked scary authentic, right? I mean, scary. You had guns. You couldn't tell. Like I said, I did have a toy M16. And I did have a toy 45 and a toy 357 Magnum, and I could have robbed a bank with those. I mean, that's how real they looked. And we played guns.
All the time.
There was a very famous for our community, the water tower. Okay, remember the water tower that you could see almost across most parts of San Carlos, because it was so tight. And it kind of stood at the time when we were kids. It was blue. They painted it eventually brown, like a rust color. I don't know why.
With a little silver
water
cloud
tower
on it. Yeah.
The water tower was like a landmark and was visible, and we would go where there are toy guns, and we would play guns, which was basically just getting into teams. And it wasn't paintball, but the idea was kind of the same. And we would play guns at the water tower. And looking back on it, it's like, because kids don't play guns. We don't encourage that sort of thing. But we could play guns because they were like cops and robbers or soldiers. Those were the only people that we really thought of having guns, although that did not seem to be the case in my family. You know what I mean? So it was a thing that we could sort of, again, culturally, much like the Black Panther in Mobile, Alabama, it's like we played guns in San Carlos, and it didn't faze anybody whatsoever. So I can completely relate to that story. And like I said, and they started making toy guns like in the 80s and they would paint them like orange or something like that because they wanted to make a distinction that it was, which then I always thought, it's like, well, then if I'm a criminal, I just paint my gun orange. Right. And then they think I've got a toy gun or something like that. So I think it can sort of works both ways.
That goes back to the urban legends. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that this has happened many times. I don't doubt that this happened. But the big story when you and I were younger was, the kid who only had a cap gun, but the police officer misunderstood and shot him.
Right.
But I mean, in general, guns were, they just had a whole different meaning because we all grew up on Westerns. And our parents all grew up on Westerns, and a lot of their TV heroes and radio heroes were all, like Gene Autry and, the Lone Ranger and all that stuff. Yeah.
Don't mention Gene Autry. Any thoughts of Gene Autry and a gun would have been a completely different story. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, guns, and I don't know, again, if I mentioned this before, it's like we had, gun ownership. My dad had a gun cabinet, okay? And it wasn't locked. It was sort of like a really nice piece of furniture, right? My grandfather had one as well. He had guns in there, and he also kept his pornography in there, right? All his recent issues of Playboy. I think I told the story. We didn't care about the guns. We cared about the porn. We went right past the guns and went to Miss October.
Well, the gun you can't use, but this picture, I can use this. This I can do something with, right? This is something that I can, now we're talking.
Exactly. But those guns, okay, and I think now we're in a good spot to talk about this, is those guns, a couple of those guns came out every year, one night of the year. Guess what night that was, Jeff?
I'm going to say Arbor Day.
Oh, so close.
Okay.
Came out every New Year's Eve. Okay.
Yeah.
So New Year's Eve, didn't have a lot of family traditions, and I don't know, and you can see if you had tell me about any family traditions you had. Ours was shooting guns at midnight into the air.
Yeah.
I'm sure those bullets landed somewhere, hopefully not in anybody's skull.
Yeah.
We all survived. Shooting guns at midnight. I can remember as a kid to the point where I almost got knocked down because, my dad's like holding my arm as I'm firing a 9mm straight into the air. And I can feel the kick. I did shoot a 12 gauge shotgun one time. I know I can do it. And literally it hit me in my shoulder and knocked me down. But no rhyme or reason to it. No second thought to it. It's like, hey, it's New Year's. Let's go shoot some guns.
Yeah.
The scary part, we went out there and it was quick. It's not like we were out there shooting for an hour, right? Go out there, depending on how many people in the family were around that particular New Year's Eve. It was generally at my grandfather's house because he had this big sort of backyard backed up by a canyon. So I think that was part of the thought process. Like none of the bullets would land on anybody. But, and the scary part, so we'd go out there, we'd fire off a few rounds. Another person would fire off, it was 2 minutes tops, right? But probably quite a few shots. Do you think you heard any sirens? Do you think anybody called the police? Do you think anybody started screaming or seeing what was going on or anything else or, sticking their head out the windows and yelling at us? No.
Yeah.
It was like, it might as well have been a firecracker or somebody banging on pots and pans. It was just,
Well,
those idiots are shooting their guns off. It's New Year's, and then they're not going to do it again for another 365 days.
I mean, look, people, yeah, and you're talking to the right guy, but I mean, people back then, again, this goes without saying, we didn't have school shootings, right? Or, kids getting murdered by the dozens, every other month. So the whole relationship with guns was very different back then. And we just didn't think of them as some crazy person is going to walk into a store and just mow people down until out here in San Diego, we had the infamous, and I think it was here, Chris, right? The McDonald's incident, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where a guy, this is one of the first things that I can ever remember in terms of a mass shooting other than Brenda Spencer, which we can talk about on a different episode, I think. But
yeah, I think we should.
Because we were right there when it happened. But this was a guy who just walked into a McDonald's and just killed a lot of people. And that was the first time that we ever, well, I mean, as a kid, me personally, ever thought about it in that way. But Chris, at my house, and I teased this in the last episode, my dad was a huge fan of guns. And when I say that, he was just a guy that loved Westerns and really identified with it. My dad wasn't a guy who wanted to do anything other than target practice and go out to the desert and responsibly shoot his guns at rocks and little targets. And he just loved them.
He was responsible, at least.
But if you went into our house, Chris, when you said, hey, man, we had a cabinet that had guns, our house was the cabinet. I mean, to say that we had guns, we had rifles and pistols and experimental guns. Chris, by the time I was, in sixth grade, I already knew how to field strip a 9mm Uzi. I'm not joking. And we always knew how to safely handle guns, and we were taught and brought up that way. But my dad would write articles. He was a writer, and he would write articles for Guns and Ammo and American Handgunner, right? So he loved them. Anyway, long story short is we actually were one of those families that talk about traditions. We reloaded ammo in the garage. What does that mean? We made our own bullets. What does that mean? That means he trusted me to take a giant bar that looked like something that came from, Fort Knox, except it was silver, of lead. Chris, I don't know if you know that lead is toxic, but I was literally holding a giant thing of lead in my hand and dipping it into a melting pot that was molten lead, and then opening up the little spigot and pouring molten lead into bullet molds, then applying grease to it, and then resizing the shells and building the whole thing with a thing called a primer and the powder and the shell, and then making bullets. And I was a machine, man. And I remember we had to do a report in sixth grade that was called a photo essay. And I came in and showed everybody pictures of me making bullets, and they're all, yay. Nowadays, watch list. Dude, you would be on Homeland Security's watch list.
Parents are arrested.
Yeah. This kid in sixth grade is making bullets in the garage. Everyone, investigate the whole family, right? But that's, anyway.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is, so you'd have been that guy, like, like in the movie when there's like the protagonist is maybe he's been lured out of retirement and he's got to go take on the cartel or something like that. And then he goes to a guy and he goes to his house and he like fixes them up with weapons and he gives them all that kind of stuff. You'd have been that guy. Basically, all right, well, I got this. You might want to try this. This is some real heavy artillery. And the foreshadowing at the end of the film was like, he's going to bring this out at the end, at the climax, when he needs to shoot through a wall. Or
Right, yeah. That kid that used to reload with his dad. And I was an unusual kid back then because I was the only kid
back then.
But I would say within a 10-mile radius, I was probably the only kid reloading ammunition in my garage. It wasn't like a common thing. But, if you were to go to the Midwest or the South during that time, you would be weird if you weren't a kid reloading ammunition in your garage and knowing all about guns. So I don't know. I guess it's all just frame of reference there. But
that's wild. I mean, and again, and somehow yet you didn't become a blacksmith or an arms dealer or anything like that when you were an adult. You veered away from the family as a hobby, right? Because again, even though your dad was a writer and wrote about guns, so then he could go and he could speak he could have an educated conversation with somebody in the industry talking about munitions or gunpowder or, something along, or shell casings. And that was just purely for personal use, right? You didn't pack that stuff up. And nowadays you could, nowadays you couldn't, but I mean, you could have you could have sold it, right? You could have gone to gun shows or flea markets and sold, shell, weapons, bullets, for 357s or something like that.
One of my dad's favorite stores back then was Hiram's Guns and Liquor. Liquor sold next to the guns,
right?
Pretty commonplace. And it didn't
America.
I talked about my buddy Scott when I was a kid, the one that I always got into a lot of trouble with. He's the one that, if this was the A team, he was the demolitions expert, right? Always had a half stick of dynamite or an M80 in his hand at all times. He's the one who famously had me light him on fire so he could jump off the roof into the pool, right? That's Scott. Yeah, when Scott saw my supplies in the garage, imagine he had some other ideas, right? So I would at times steal gunpowder and we would make a little line of it leading up to a giant pile of it, right? Just like Mission Impossible or something, and you'd see like you light it on fire and blow stuff up. But also, for those of you that don't know, and who cares, I guess, but in the back of every bullet is this tiny little metal pellet, and it's called a primer. And if you hit it hard enough, it makes a very loud bam, which is part of the noise you hear when the gun goes off. But it also creates a spark, and that's what ignites the powder. Okay, lesson over. But those things were so awesome because if you stacked them up and hit them with a hammer, it made a noise that was the equivalent of like 100 packs of caps, right? This was like each primer sounded like smacking 2 whole packs of caps, rolls of caps. And again, for those that don't know, a cap is a little charge of gunpowder that would be in a cap gun, right? On a roll of paper.
Like the size of like a pinhead. I mean, it was so small, those little,
Scott had the
red paper.
Scott had the genius idea, and I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it, combined the power of primers with the aerodynamics of a Jart. And man, when you put those two things together, so we would tape about 7 primers to the nose of a lawn dart and then chuck it up in the air and make sure that it hit something hard like cement. And it was like an aftershock. It was boom, ka-ja! Like you actually heard like this extra breaking the sound barrier echo, which we just loved. So anyway, yeah, that was trouble. We eventually had to stop doing that for a number of reasons, Chris, as you can imagine.
Now that I think about it, my dad being in the adult beverage business, I had a garage full of alcohol. So technically we could have opened our own Hiram's.
I'm surprised we didn't.
Basically with alcohol and munitions, So, then did that change? See, that's just the whole thing. So I grew up, so I never gave guns a second thought. And now obviously I do with all the things that have changed. And I think it was, again, and had some very deep discussions with once I got married about a gun in the house, that kind of stuff. And I never, ever gave it a second thought. But I think that was definitely, I was used to them. I knew how to handle them. I knew, and I obviously I knew what the dangers were and whatnot. But just, it was something growing up. And again, we fired them off on New Year's Eve. So how, again, it couldn't get much more, like I said, just sort of benevolent than, well, we're just shooting them off in the air and they're for protection or whatever. But that is amazing. So whatever happened to the Thill munitions supply? Did it just sort of fade away? Like what happened to all the tools?
Yeah.
Right. Because again, if you'd have found that, it's like you'd have been a suspect, right? It's like, well, we went to the garage and they had gunpowder and lead, smelting machines and industrial drill press and all this kind of stuff that you probably had, right? So it's like, did that just sort of fade away? Did it go to garage sale? It's like, how do you stop the munitions train? I guess would be my question.
They stopped it by downsizing. When they retired, they went from the 2-story suburban tri-level house to a townhome. And in downsizing, a lot of that stuff just either disappeared or got sold off, or other people. I'm sure my dad gave it to buddies of his, but yeah, only a couple of little items made it to the townhome. So yeah, they all kind of disappeared after that. Who knows? Or maybe they ended up in Afghanistan. I don't know, Chris. I don't know where all that went.
Well, so again, that was a New Year's tradition, and it's funny because looking back on New Year's, definitely one of those things I think that has changed since we were kids. Like I remember staying up late. I remember, watching Dick Clark and sort of that, because, and even though then it was just like, oh wait, it's already, the next year in New York because they're 3 hours ahead, and the Times Square. And it was hard to relate to that, right? It's all these people freezing their asses off. Here's Dick Clark standing on some rooftop in a trench coat. They're waiting for the ball to drop. And then, Olivia Newton-John's going to come out and lip sync Physical or something like that. You know what I mean? So, but it was one of those things to me. It was like, I remember it very vividly, that was, again, one of those, singing Auld Lang Syne, which I still don't even know if I pronounce it correctly. I don't even know what it means, but it's everything's exploding and ball dropping. And then it gets very, like, everybody's celebrating, and then it gets very sad, and they're singing about in the days of Auld Lang Syne.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what those days, I guess that was the past 365 days. I don't know, but kind of have that, I guess, again, one of those things, looking as a kid, it was a big deal. I remember what a big deal, but maybe anti-clang, Mac. Do you remember, again, because we were too young the first time, but man, when 79 turned into 1980, it's like, we've got a whole new decade. We're in the 1980s. We're going to have flying cars pretty soon, right? And again, I remember like, wow, and waking up the next day going, yeah, 1980 seems pretty much like 1979. And there was really, but that anticipation of the new year was, and I don't know, is it downplayed? I used to, again, big into the parties, I think even in our teens and early 20s. Now everybody's like, I just want to stay home and put on some comfortable sweatpants because I don't want to leave the house.
And let's not forget the relevance of certain years when it came to pop culture, right? So obviously 1976 was a big one. We talked about that bicentennial. But I always went by like science fiction dates, right? So once you started getting into the 90s, God forbid, those were dates that were used by old shows and old movies to talk about the future. So as we both know, by the time we reached 1999, according to the TV show Space 1999, we had a fully operating base on the moon, right? Or you can go back to Blade Runner, right? Where by the time you get into the 90s and that movie Blade Runner, buddy, it is a dystopian hellscape, completely run by this. It was always dark and rainy, with giant looping TV screens. It almost looked like Japan on LSD or something. It was just weird. Yeah.
Gloomy.
Or Mad Max, another great example, right? By the time you get in the 90s.
Terminator.
Yeah, Terminator, right? Yes.
Judgment Day was 1997, I think. And so was, I think, Escape from New York.
Oh, man, yes.
May have been the same. So like Times, or, Manhattan. Manhattan is a prison. And it's just like, well, Manhattan's got some sketchy parts, but I certainly wouldn't call it
Those writers did not stock a lot of faith in humanity, man. They had an escalated timeline on when shit was going to go south.
Exactly. It's going to go south. And guess what? It's going to happen pretty effing soon, right?
Right around the corner.
Because it's like, it's just like, you better get your shit together now.
Yeah.
So don't even worry about, your high school reunion, or don't even worry about marrying your kids off, because it's all going to come to a head. And I think that was, no, you're absolutely right. It was just like, because I think, and we've touched on this a little bit, the future, we had high expectations and low expectations at the same time, as you just mentioned, right? It's like the technology is just going to be insane, but everything's going to have gone to shit, right? And it's going to be, everybody's going to be really morose and sad and just trying to survive. But you got like really cool guns and tech and guns and flying cars and, computer screens and all this kind of stuff that you can carry around with you. So somehow it didn't really jibe. It's like, well, wait a minute. You have all these great innovations, but everything's terrible. It's like, what happened in between, right? But you're absolutely right that the future, it was, but so the New Year's, right? The perfect time to look at the future and try to think, all right, clean slate. I'm going to make my New Year's resolutions, right? Which I think statistics, God knows who keeps statistics on New Year's resolutions, but most people break them by like February 9th or something like that. And again, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to, I used to make one of like, I'm going to read more, it's like, I think even there's like, I'm going to read, 12, I'm going to read a book a month, which is like, I'm going to read a book a month. I'm going to read 12 books a year. And generally by mid-November, I only have like 11 and a half more books to go, in the last 6 months of the year.
As long as there's no fucking way on the planet that you're ever going to make good on any of those, you may as well reach for the stars, right? You may as well say something crazy, right? Like, this year I'm going to lose 50 pounds and I'm going to be donating a lot of money to charity. Plus, I'm going to learn another language. Plus, yeah, dude, pile it on, man. None of it's going to happen. You may as well just go for it. Shoot for the moon. Well, and in fact, maybe this is the year you finally make it to the moon. How's that sound? Yay. And then, like you said, by January 15th, you're like, fuck, none of this is even coming close. Wait a minute. I have to do this stuff? Oh, come on.
I think at the same time, Jeff, people have started to realize that how unattainable that is. So they lower the bar. Like, I hear people, it's like, guess what? It's like, I'm going to have dry January. It's like, okay, number one, you're talking about 31 days.
Okay,
yeah, you're 31 days. Okay. Number two, you had dry January because you were a drunk for at least the last half of December. All right. You more than made up for the fact that, hey, you know what? I'm going at a pretty heavy pace right now. But guess what? January 1st, and actually not even January 1st, because it's not like they stop drinking, right? Because if you're making a pledge for dry January, again, like I said, that means you've been hitting it pretty hard up until New Year's Eve. You're not going to stop as soon as, Dick Clark's zombie corpse says it's the next year, right? You're going to kind of, well, that actually means tomorrow morning. And then that actually means, but I've got the champagne, so that actually means after mimosas or even whatever. I mean, maybe you mean the second. I'll give you that.
Well, a couple guests came over. We didn't expect them. I'm going to have to drink a beer with my buddy, but that doesn't really count.
Right. So again, it's like, wow, dry January. You're really going out on a limb. Okay. Wow. You're really saying I can go 31 days without drinking. Because you know what they call somebody who can't go 31 days without drinking? Yes, that's right. They're probably an alcoholic. Okay. So it's just like,
well said.
But that's okay. The first sign of, of addressing your problem is admitting it exists, right? But just saying it's like, but there's drinking and then there's drinking. There's sipping on your IPAs, which I know some certain people on this podcast like to do. And right, as he raises his arms in the air, so to that, but again, but if I said, Jeff, you can't drink until February 1st.
Well, first of all, don't do that. Don't ever tell me that I can't do something. You may as well. Yeah, that is a fruitless gesture.
Don't drink until January 1st.
God bless you for saying it. But yeah, now you've pissed me off, frankly.
So again, I think like New Year's resolution should be like any other sort of personal goal, right? And there are corporations that have, and I don't know if where your company where Jeff, where employees have to set goals every year, and they're called, a lot of them they're called SMART goals, and I won't go through the entire acronym, but the A in the SMART goal acronym is achievable. Okay, so you can't say, yes, one of my goals is to fly like Superman. I don't think you're going to make it. Maybe you can make it one time if you jump off a very high building. So making goals, making resolutions that are achievable, right? That are something that you can just kind of like, yeah, I'm going to have, for maybe some people, so I'm going to have dry January 3rd. I'm not going to drink on that day. Or it's just like, I'm not going to read 12 books. I'm going to read a book, which again can be a bit of a challenge in the way our lives run now. But making your resolution more achievable, making them SMART resolutions. I'm going to get off my soapbox right now and say I'll stop my lecture. But maybe your resolution should really just be sort of like goals, right? More of a guideline, and then you can make it achievable as opposed to by February 9th, you've just said, fuck it. And you just go on living your miserable life from the previous year.
I did one thing that I think I can achieve. I did make an adjustment, and it's all about 2025. And here's my one adjustment, and I think I can do it, Chris. I got one of these apps, and there's a million of them out there. And the apps are focused on micro learning, which is just is such a marketing term. It just means, right, little snippets, little knowledge bites. Yeah, and it's not Duolingo, but I think that's a great goal to try to become bilingual within a few years. But this is replace doom scrolling, right, with just going on the app and learning something new, right? And it's so cool, right? Because there's physics and geography and math and history, and it doesn't have to be boring. And I'm at an age now where I do find that stuff fascinating. So I'm actually really looking forward to diving in and spending 30 minutes a day doing that. And because I happen to be someone who isn't super excited about where we're headed for the next 4 years, wink, wink, I really need to disengage, right? And that's just a good rule in general, right, Chris?
Absolutely.
I've already gotten rid of cable, right? But I never want to become a shut-in. I don't want to be one of those people that buries my head in the sand and doesn't know what's happening. But you know what? Honestly, I'm looking forward to just learning new things and not engaging in these emotional roller coasters that is Instagram and other social media. Facebook, I think, is still kind of okay because it's mostly just friends of mine that are showing pictures of their kids and talking about what they ate. I find that to be pretty benign. But yeah, man, that's my big resolution, is to disengage from that shit and come out on 2026 going, holy crap, I didn't know the American Revolution was like that. And, oh, so that's what a photon does. Are you kidding me? Tunisia is on that continent? Well, look you learn something new every day. I just don't want to go to my grave a dumb fuck. I don't want to go to my grave with a first grade knowledge of the world, right? Like politicians. I want to actually have real knowledge, right? I want to actually have someone come up to me and go, hey, let's do a little Jeopardy quiz. And I can mostly follow along, right? At least I'm not going to embarrass myself by how stupid I am about the world around me. That's it. That's my goal.
I think those are achievable. I like it. I think I have to join you on that journey. We're into 40 some episodes of this podcast, but I think we're just starting to get started. We have a lot more in mind. We have some things coming up that I think our listeners will enjoy. Taking this to some different content and some different ideas, and some different voices they're going to hear, and looking forward to that. So, I don't know, Jeff. Maybe I was going to say until next time, but like we used to say when we were leaving for Christmas vacation, hey, Jeff, until next year.
Until next year, Chris.